Welcome to CropCast, a monthly Arable podcast. This podcast pulls together the latest information, expertise and experiences from people in the arable industry. I am Tiffany Stevenson, and in today's episode we're going to discuss crop trials and innovation with Dr Neil Havis, Senior Plant Pathologist at SRUC, and Simon Oxley, Arable Innovation Lead at SRUC. Neil, would you like to begin by introducing yourself a little bit better?
As you've said, my name's Neil Havis. I'm applied plant pathologist, so I've been working at SRUC for 3 decades now, looking to the major issues that affect crops in Scotland and trying to navigate some potential or develop some potential control measures for farmers and growers. I'm involved in the Plant Health Centre as well for Scotland, and I've served 2 spells on the HDB recommended list committee for barley, oats and other cereals.
So you definitely have a wealth of knowledge.
In theory, yes.
And Simon, what about you?
Hi, yes, I joined SRUC 6 months ago as Arable Innovation Lead. And this is really something new in SRUC. It refers to some innovation centres, which I'm sure you'll ask a few more questions later. I used to work actually at SRUC a number of years ago. And like Neil, I was a plant pathologist. I then moved on to AHDB and worked closely on variety evaluation and then on cropping systems. And there I gained interest in other areas, including the use of data in agriculture. And I was self-employed for a couple of years and did a lot of work with agrimetrics before seeing the light and turned back again to SRUC.
Well, it's great having you back at SRUC. I'm sure Neil will be appreciating a friendly face.
Well, I won't embarrass Simon by saying he was my former boss, so I have to speak nicely to him.
Okay, Simon, would you like to begin by what does innovation mean to you?
To me, this for us within SRUC is a matter of how can we capitalize on all the wonderful ideas that come out either from the schools and the research side, or they might come out from the researchers, including Neil, or for that matter, the consultants, or for that matter, anybody in the organization. They may have a wonderful idea and saying, how, this would really benefit the industry, and my focus is on crop science. How can we capitalize on it? And within SRUC, that currently would be a real challenge. They would say, well, go and get some money. And then, as you know, well, that's the real challenge. So there's a whole group of here of 6 innovation centres. They cover a wide range of areas. There's veterinary and aquaculture, dairy, pigs and poultry, beef and sheep, food and drink, and obviously my area, crop science. But to a certain extent, if you have a wonderful idea, you don't have to identify which bit does it go in, because we all talk to each other. And it may well be that in one area, you come to me and I say, well, actually, that fits really well with food and drink. And then we can capitalize on that. But it's a matter of how can we support both internally, or for that matter, small businesses who we may work with. How can we support them? And that support may well be through the expertise of individuals, or it could be support through the infrastructure. And on the crop science, we can start with a vertical farm. We have controlled environment and glass houses. We have labs, particularly I'm thinking about the molecular labs here, field trials, data, but probably best not to ask me too much about that. I can bore you on that. But the other important area is the consultants. For example, if somebody has a really wonderful idea, it may be a small and medium business. They say, we think this is something which is great for the industry. Probably before we start to spend a lot of time to support their development, we might put them in front of consultants or the farmer groups and ask them what their view is. Because in effect, if they're selling to a farmer audience, well, let's speak with the farmers first, get their feedback, and that will probably refine their ideas as to whether they think they're on the right lines or whether in effect they need to just steer off. And on the basis of that, although I talked about these individual areas, they all flow through. For example, the first thing is a company might come in and want to use some glasshouse space. And then beyond that, if anything's successful, let's take it to the field. And then you can sort of take it beyond there, and you've got more of the detail to support them to create their ideas into something tangible, which will create income.
There's definitely a lot going on. It sounds like a great opportunity if somebody has an idea that they can actually start doing a bit more with it instead of just thinking about it and tucking it away into their drawer and forgetting about it again.
Absolutely. I think that's the important thing is come and speak to us. We are doing road shows, mostly internal at this stage, just so that SRUC staff know, but we are also talking to external groups as well. So just come and talk to us. And as I said, it doesn't matter. Just speak to one of us, and we can then capture your ideas and then talk about them within the group.
Well, there might just be one person listening to this podcast with an idea and thinking it could go a little bit further, having heard you explain what it all is that you do as well. So from a crop science point of view, where do you see the most potential for future innovation at the moment?
You have to think the first thing is if you're a farmer is the real challenge is how do I make a profit? So there are some probably near-term ones as to how do you maintain your current business is very important. And the current cost of inputs is obviously increasing, particularly with nitrogen. So there may be certain crops, for that matter, or how do you improve the health of your soil so that you're less reliant on nitrogen? So there could well be certain additives or different types of rotations or systems which you would like to help there. From my point of view, the longer term challenges and probably opportunities come in with climate change and also with extremes in weather, and how do we deal with those? And for that, we can actually learn from the past. I've now come onto the data, I'm afraid. But what I've found out from SRUC, we have a wealth of data, both on current research and also historic. We have historic diaries from the 1920s at Crobston. We have historic weather, and they talk about what crops they put in and the yields. And in some of the long-term experiments, we have soil samples as well. The first thing we're trying to do here is capture it, digitize it, so it doesn't get lost. Because in effect, particularly if you're looking at models and machine learning, it needs a lot of information to learn from. And by having 50, 60 years of back information, you may say, well, is it really relevant today? Some of the aspects will be relevant because you've got more weather related seasons in order to understand the crops, both the crops, the quality, and also the health of them. And that I think is something we've not tapped into. And we might want to do it ourselves through the researchers, or it may well be there are people externally who want to work with us because they may have the ideas for innovative tools, but they may not necessarily have the back data to do it. But also on the diagnostic side, I mean, this is an area Neil obviously knows a huge amount about. How can we use, molecular diagnostics to understand what pests and diseases do we have? And not only that, is how do you interpret it to a farmer? Yes, we've detected something, so what? Is it important? But this is where you bring in the molecular diagnostic groups, not just on the crop science, but actually we have veterinary high throughput labs, and we also work with Eurofins. So it's not just a matter of thinking, oh, who are the crop scientists who we want to work with on this particular technology. We have a wealth of experience on the animal health side and through industrial labs to take the ideas. And initially, it might be we need research in order to, well, I suppose you could say we start with the consultants. What are the main issues affecting them? And so we can prioritize the issues. Can we develop the diagnostics or do they already exist? So how do we then make it so that the likes, for example, Neil can interpret the results? And a lot of this could be not just this year, because I mean, as you're aware, every season is so different now, which is why we need a lot of years of information to try and understand, in one year, one pest or one disease may be an issue, and in another year, something else may come up. And on that basis, what's new? What new things are flying in, be it from Europe, which are affecting our crops and also the animal health as well.
So, Neil, you've been out and about in the crops this year. What are you seeing? How are they looking? What are the main challenges?
What are we seeing, Tiffany? Well, I'm afraid it's the same, and certainly in the wheat crops, it's the same issue that we had last year. I mean, anybody listening to this who had a wheat crop last year will be familiar with yellow rust, the change in the yellow rust races, and the collapse of resistance, which had been bred into the wheat lines. So last year we saw yellow rust come in early. We saw it come in on varieties which had very high resistance ratings in the HDB recommended list. Not only did yellow rust appear, but it also persisted. And that was something that was seen not just in the UK, but across Europe as well. Researchers are quite baffled, usually with yellow rust. As temperatures warm up, it starts to go into decline. It has an optimal temperature of around about 15 degrees. But last year in the warm summer, the yellow rust just kept going and going and cycling and cycling. So that's been a challenge. There's been some work looking into the changing the race structure, and they've actually called the new race, which is causing all the problems, the champion race, because that's one of the varieties that was particularly susceptible. So there's European-wide efforts to try and look into what's going on with the yellow rust. In terms of other diseases, it's the usual culprits. So we're looking for light leaf spot and oilseed rape. We're seeing rhynchosporium and mildew in the winter barley. Not nearly ramularia time, not quite. And interestingly, in the wheat crops, what we're seeing is septoria at the base of the crop. And we had that dry spell, and the yellow rust is coming at the top. So you can almost split the crop. The top two leaves have got yellow rust, and if you go lower down the canopy, there's a septoria. We've just had a couple of weeks of rain, so it'll be interesting to see what happens if the septoria can move up. If you've used sprays which have protected your crop from yellow rust, you'll find that septoria is going to be coming up the canopy to attack you from below.
It's interesting that now it's not just looking and seeing what's happening in the rest of Scotland and looking a little bit further south to England, but it's also looking over to the continent, see what's happening there, if you're saying it's widespread.
That absolutely. And we've seen this before with yellow rust. We've seen the introduction of races from continental Europe. It's a small spore. It can travel a long way on the wind. So, as Simon said, agriculture is a dynamic industry, and in terms of the weed pest disease pressures, that's always changing. And in terms of the pests, we're seeing aphids flying earlier every year. We're not seeing the cold winters that keep their numbers down. So the implications on virus, how we control and stop the spread of viruses into some of the potato crops, is going to be a challenge. We've always relied in Scotland on the northern latitude, meaning that the aphids won't get there before we've been able to grow the crop and harvest it. And that's going to be a challenge going forward because they are flying earlier and earlier. The aphid monitoring that goes on is showing a difference in the species. We're seeing species more associated with England appearing in Scotland much earlier.
It just goes to show changes to the climate are already having an impact. And it sounds like people are going to have to start being aware now to make sure that they're making the steps going forward in the next few years to make sure they aren't then hit hard in their crops when suddenly things they didn't think they could get suddenly start appearing.
Yes, absolutely. It's always changing. And if you've seen the weather, the news report today about El Nino has now started, and they're predicting warmer temperatures. So this is the pattern of things to come. Sadly, it's not going to be, it's just going to be a one-off and revert back to whatever normal really was. But it may just things are getting warmer and warmer. So that has implications. And for researchers, it means we look south to see what issues higher temperatures mean for our crops. So we may see pests and diseases marching further north. A good example of that is Fusarium graminarium. It's one of the species involved in the head blight complex, and that's been marching northwards in Europe as temperatures increase all the time. So it's looking out for things like that because it has that implications on mycotoxins in harvested grain.
So, with the likes of the yellow rust coming in and the collapse of the varieties, has there been much change to the crop trials? Have they found that some of the varieties are now off the recommended lists? What changes have been made?
There was a recalculation of the resistance rating for varieties last year, and HDB produced a watch list of varieties. So people, if they'd chosen that variety, they were told to watch out your varieties on the watch list. So keep your eyes open. It's going to be more susceptible than it has been in the past. And even in the trials, when you're out looking at them, you can see the plots, you can see the varieties that are getting hit hard by the yellow rust, and other ones look not so bad. So a good time to have a look. We're going to come on and talk about the open days, but a good time to go and have a look at another variety perhaps, because if the one you've picked and the one you're growing is susceptible to yellow rust and you're struggling to control it, luckily we still have strobilurins and other fungicides which are still effective. But if you want to look for some more genetic resistance, and as Simon says, the importance of cutting your inputs if possible. So the first step on that in an IPM program is make use of genetic resistance. So perhaps think about changing your variety, and then you might save on your fungicide input as well.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely can't just rely on the fungicides now. Might as well do what we can with changes to the genetics and try and make the most of those.
No, you can't, because fungicide resistance is a big issue. In many crops, it's the other thing that's going on at the same time. Every time we use a fungicide, you're putting a selection pressure on the pathogen. So we're looking for resistance, and also the number of fungicides available is slowly declining. So it's not a case of we have a huge arsenal. There's not too many new products come to market. There are a few this year, but again, there's some pressure on the fungicides as well.
So you mentioned open days. I think this is probably a good time just to mention it, because it probably is a great idea for people to get out and actually see what the trials have been finding out, and what is actually to see.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so SRUC will have 2 trial open days this summer, the 23rd of June in Southfield in Midlothian, and the 25th we're having an open evening up in Aberdeenshire. So the chance to come along, as I said, the chance to come along and see all the varieties on the winter wheat recommended list. And there's treated and untreated plots, so you can see how these varieties would perform with a good fungicide program and how they would perform with no fungicides at all. So it gives you an indication of the potential host resistance. On the same site at Southfield, we have the winter wheat fungicide performance trial. So obviously, if you are relying on chemistry, you want to know how well these chemicals compete with each other, which is the best option. So it'll give you the chance to see visually which is the most effective fungicide against, as I said, yellow rust, septoria. The trials are set up for septoria, but you'll see the control that they give against yellow rust as well, and other diseases, maybe brown rust. And also at Southfield, for the first time, HDB are funding a pilot project looking at the potential of biofungicides. So Simon said challenges on for farmers to look at their inputs, and we know fungicides, we know the selection pressure, we know they're not cheap, they're expensive. Is there any potential value in including a biofungicides in your trial? So at Southfield, we have 2 different varieties. We have a trial set up which shows you the efficacy of these fungicides to control septoria, and also what they would bring to if you had a base fungicide program of, say, 50% or half recommended dose rates, and then you applied the biofungicide as well. So part of the IPM pyramid is to stack up all of your control options. So we're stacking the biofungicide on top of the chemistry to see if they're able to give good control. We also, at Southfield, we have a FRAS trial, and Simon was talking about the importance of nitrogen, and on the farming programme this week, you'll have heard concern from some growers that nitrogen or availability of nitrogen is going to be a real issue next year because of the current dispute in the Middle East. So we have a Means of Lauriston funded project looking at the potential of insect frass, which is the waste product from insect production. So insects are produced for protein. One of the things they produce is waste as they break down different food sources. So it's applying these to crops to see if they can be used as a fertilizer substitute. It's the first year of trials, so we have wheat and spring barley at Southfield to look at. We also have the spring barley recommended list. We have a couple of research projects from two of the students, one looking at nitrogen use efficiency, which again is very important. You want to make the most of the nitrogen that you're applying. It's getting more and more expensive, so you want to make the most of it if possible. And another one looking at the potential for genetic control of ramularia. So one of the issues we've had with ramularia in barleys is there's no potential host resistance. And that could be a product of the fact that breeders have focused on elite lines, which don't have ramularia resistance. They've been focused on increasing yield rather than increasing disease resistance. So the PhD student will be able to talk, the two PhD students will talk about their projects, give farmers an insight into that as well. And I'll be there presenting some of the Scottish Government work we're doing on barley control. And that's integrated pest management. That's 3 different varieties. That's looking at different control programs which incorporate things like biofungicides, which incorporate resistant solicitors, simple products that elicit the defense response in the plant. And also we've got the added, what we're adding as a factor is differences in terms of nitrogen input as well. Because as I've said, people are looking to cut back on their inputs. So how can some of these products still give you a good crop? We're looking at biostimulants as well, I should have said that. Biostimulants as well. So can a biostimulant be a substitute for your nitrogen fertilizer input in spring barley lines? So that's something else that farmers can see for themselves. And if they like the idea, if they're keen to try it themselves, then they can go away and try it in a small scale on their own farm as well.
So what will people see if they go to the Aberdeen event?
So the Aberdeen trial site, it's hosting our fungicide performance trial in oilseed rape. So you'll get the chance to, if you're growing oilseed rape, to see how the fungicides are performing in controlling that particular disease. There'll also be plots showing the winter wheat varieties in a similar way that we're showing the varieties at Southfield. We've got some demo plots for the biofungicides as well. And we're going to be talking about fungicide resistance in the main products which are used to control septoria. So that's a big issue as well. You'll get the chance to see spring barley varieties as well and have the chance to speak to researchers and consultants about the research that's going on.
That sounds like there is a huge amount of research going on at the moment. I don't think you appreciate it until you go and reel it off like that, Neil. And there is so much going on, which is great to hear that it's all going on for the industry. I will go and put in the show notes a link for people to go and sign up to one of these crop trial events. And there will be many other crop trial events around the country with different organisations are arranging as well. So it's a good excuse to go and have a look, think about what your varieties are and to consider what you're doing and why you're doing it.
That's right. So I was just going to say, it's great you can see the trials in action, but obviously we track all of these trials to yield. So if you attend one of these trial open evenings, you can then combine that with one of our January winter events, and you can see at the end of the day what it actually meant in terms of yield and the final response.
Can I mention that these open days is a great place to go and see how the varieties or the treatments are working just in your local neighborhood. But the real power is actually the fact that there will be trials done, in a whole wide range of areas around England and as well as Scotland. I'm not sure if there are any in Wales, but also they're done over several years. So it's great to seeing, well, how have they done in June So in this year, but we combine the information to have a much better understanding as to how the varieties or these treatments will work over a wide range of different environments, and that really helps us understand more about how are these varieties going to perform. Sometimes varieties may have work really well in one particular season, and then in a different area they may not work so well. And having such a wide geographical spread allows us to understand the strengths or the challenges of each variety. I know a lot of this information is then distilled, and the consultants can then give you advice, but you don't make a decision based on just seeing the trials on one day and said, well, they looked okay, or even just the yields from one site and one season. That might just give you a quick snapshot, but the power of the whole system is this diversity across seasons and across sites, and that really helps us understand the robustness of these varieties.
We were talking earlier about the changing weather and the fact that yellow rust has moved its way up from the continent and everything's moving further north. So potentially what didn't perform quite so well in Scotland 5 years ago might actually be performing a lot better now because climate has changed slightly.
It's an interesting point, that because we always think, oh, East Anglia, that's where we grow the high quality milling wheat. We're better for the soft wheats or whatever. It is worth looking to find out if over the longer term are we going to be. I mean, Neil kind of showed there are lots of problems, but are there any opportunities? I'm not sure at this stage, but perhaps if we don't have the intense heat, which usually makes crops, die back earlier, particularly if it's over, is it 30 degrees? I can't remember the actual number. But the other thing is, if we have better water supply, are there opportunities here? I don't know at this stage, but if we have the information, then it does allow us to think, particularly with some of the Met Office have some really good data on the future of climate change in their forecasts. You may say, well, they may not be able to forecast what the weather's going to be tomorrow, so how well are they going to do in 30 years? But there are general patterns, and I think it's a matter of us, how can we capitalize on those? And so there could be some opportunities as well as a few challenges along the road.
So, for a farmer thinking about what he's going to do for next year, is the best place just to look at the recommended list once that's been produced this year? Or should he be going looking at multiple years' recommended lists as well?
Shall I start then, Neil? I mean, the first thing is talk to your consultant who knows you and also knows your area, because for sometimes, for example, if it's a particular quality market, the person who's going to buy your grain will probably say, you grow that, in which case the decision's made for you. There are obviously, particularly in the feed sector, there's a wider range of choices. It's great actually. You can either, dependent on the farmer, they can look at the information themselves. There are a few tools on the website where you can start to pick in, well, I grow this, and what other varieties complement that variety, which may help them with a decision. Normally, the thing is don't say, well, I'm growing variety X this year. I'm going to go wholesale and variety Y because the publicity says or the commercials say it's brilliant. Usually, the thing is to try. I mean, obviously, if you've got a massive breakdown, you may want to move away from it. But if you've got some new varieties, it's not to put the whole field farm into it first. You know what you're currently growing and you probably know how to grow it well. You bring something new into it, it might look great in the trials, but you have to start to use your own experience to learn how well does it fit in my system.
That is very good advice there, Simon.
Yeah, it's a good point. You need, Simon says that speaking to the consultant and knowing your own farm, your own soil, your own weather conditions, what do you have the potential to grow, and look at what your options are. It's fair to say, if speaking to farmers, there's quite a lot of interest in people trying something new as well, because of the margins on some of our traditional crops like spring barley look very tight this year. There's quite a lot of interest in people looking, well, what else could I grow? So again, something like an open event or speaking to a consultant, because there are plenty of groups that the consultants organise. You could even go along, and some of the visits, they might take you on a visit to see a different crop growing not too far away from you, just so you can see yourself, speak to the farmer who's growing it, and get a feel for, what is that a potential option for me. And as Simon says, there's always opportunities. There's a lot more maize now in Scotland than there used to be. People are looking for different options. So yeah.
I don't think you can just sit on your hands and stay where you are now. You do have to look a bit wider, think what else could you do? If you've got a crop that's been put onto the watch list, would you try and stay away from it going forward?
I think again, so if you're on the watch list, you'll be good sensible options to, you probably increase your fungicide input to try and protect your yield, but just see how well the fungicides are performing in your field. There's no substitute for walking your crops and monitoring disease levels and seeing how fungicides perform, how the crop's performing. If you still feel, and at the end of the year you get a good yield, and most importantly, I guess, you still have a margin on that crop, then that's really important. If you realise you get to the end of the year, your input costs are now so high that the margins disappeared, you may need to seriously reconsider what you're growing.
Can I just say here that the watch list, obviously you do take note of that. If you have a variety which is very weak for yellow rust, then you know you're on a treadmill of protection fungicides and you're carrying on all season. If there are alternatives which with better resistance, then that's a better choice. But the other thing is that the information we have is based on last season. And sadly, with such a change in these races, even if you've got a variety which this year has got good resistance to yellow rust and has a good untreated yield, if a new race comes in, then it might not look so good. But all that means is that, yeah, by all means, you should be focusing on the better varieties, but you still have to watch them very closely.
It sounds like it could come and cause an issue in any variety as well. It just sounds like it is changing so quickly that you just have to hope that in the year that you grow a certain crop that and certain variety, that it stands up to these pathogens.
Absolutely. It's as Simon says, it's number one decisions is market, who's selling it to. Second decision is what if sometimes the person who's going to buy it from you will specify what variety they want. We know this is the case with spring barley, why we have so much laureate growing. So if that decision's taken out of your hands, then you just have to go with it, and you're going to have to look at your inputs to protect it. But if you do have a choice, then you look at all the options available. As Simon said, you need to think about how it's performed, how new to the market it is. Sometimes with the new varieties, they don't have as many years behind them. So if we see a big change in races, a collapse in resistance can catch us out very quickly. It's happened in the past. But I think what was the surprise last year was how many varieties were hit and how severely.
You mentioned earlier, Neil, that you need to be thinking about your inputs and if it's actually going to be a profitable crop. That sounds like something farmers should be doing not just after the season, but throughout the season as well. So when they're deciding what fungicides to put on, is it worth it? But also considering what the variety's resistance is like and what the potential is as well.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, so you start with your variety. What mark are you aiming for? You look at the potential resistance. You'll have to plan ahead. If you may need to speak to an agronomist or consultant, planning your fungicide program ahead. You may need to tweak it if things change. For example, you get an outbreak of disease that wasn't expected. But you should have your costs all mapped out at the start of the season. And if you are having to add in more sprays or do more treatments, you record them accurately, and then you do a full assessment and a full gross margin calculation at the end of the year.
It also means you know what price to accept for when you're selling it as well.
Well, that's true. But I'm not going to steal our colleague Julian Bell. He's done a lot of research into which is the best thing to do, to sell in advance or just to grow the crop and store it and try and get the best price you can at the end of the year. Because I think the last time I heard him speak about it, there was basically no right answer. People that have tried one system are always sell in advance, but as opposed to people who just store and try and sell on the spot market. There's no correct answer. There's no silver bullet. We can't control what happens in a global market. So
I think it
you
also
get what you get.
depends what the farmer's preference is. Some
That's
people
true.
like having it sold in advance.
That's
They know
true.
exactly what's coming. They know it's all gone. Whereas others just aren't worried about being that organised and would rather know how many tons they have to sell before they even think about it.
It's attitude to risk, as people keep saying. It's all whether you're risk averse or you don't mind a bit of a flutter. But most people would rather have the contract signed and, well, I know where that's going for that price. But other people, well, I'll just see how it goes.
Thank you, Neil and Simon. It's amazing how much research is going on, and hopefully a few people might want to come along to a crop trial evening.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you very much.
So if you can make it along, the crop trials evenings are the 23rd of June in Midlothian, 5 p.m. start, and 25th of June in Aberdeenshire, also at 5 p.m. start. Thank you for joining us for this episode of CropCast. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please subscribe and follow so you don't miss the next episode. You also may enjoy some of our other Farm Advisory Service podcasts. This podcast was presented by myself, Tiffany Stevenson, produced by George Gawley, edited by Cameron Boff, with executive producers Kirsten Blackwood and Kerry Hammond. Come back next month on the 21st of June to hear the next episode with Mark Boucher-Gibbs.
The Farm Advisory Service Podcast. Audio advice on livestock, crops and soils, environment, rural business and more. Brought to you in association with the Scottish Government.